Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Yellow Gloves podcast. Today we're going to be recapping Cage Warriors 154 in Rome, another rip-roaring success of an event for Cage Warriors in Rome, perhaps not so much for the Italians who almost got swept on the main card, and we'll talk about that shortly, I'm sure. But the main story to come out of this is obviously Caolan Loughran becoming the Bantamweight champion. Let's do this the way we always do it. Let's go main event all the way down to the first fight on the prelims. We'll work our way through, kind of giving my thoughts on how the fights went, doing little technical breakdowns where possible, and where I think some of these fighters will land in their next fight, so on and so forth. If you've been listening to the pod for, what is it now, 11 episodes, that's actually something to talk about. We've crossed the 10 episode mark, which is pretty cool. We only launched the pod late 2022, so there's been a good amount of content to start the year in 2023, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So thanks again, obviously, to everyone who has been supporting the pod one way or another. Had a lot of cool conversations on Twitter over this card, a lot of nice comments about the podcast, which is always very humbling. But you guys don't want to hear me talking about how cool this podcast is. You want to hear me talk about how cool some of these fighters are. So I think let's just go straight into it. So Caolan Loughran, as I mentioned at the top of the pod about a minute ago, making it sound like it was ages ago, but Caolan Loughran is the new Bantamweight champion in Cage Warriors. He knocks out Dylan Hazan in round 2 of 5 and delivers Hazan his first pro loss, which is pretty insane because Hazan is one hell of a fighter, one hell of a prospect. And Caolan Loughran remains undefeated himself at 8-0. This fight was mental for as long as it lasted. It was absolutely insane. And Caolan Loughran has immediately cemented himself as one of the best fighters under the Cage Warriors banner, if he wasn't already. Don't forget, this man was the Yellow Gloves 2022 Newcomer of the Year. And if you go back and listen to that first episode, or second episode of the pod, actually, you go back and listen to that, what I said was I wouldn't be surprised if he ends 2023 with a belt around his waist and as the Yellow Gloves Fighter of the Year. So don't count this man out, because he's definitely in contention for that. What an insane main event. Like I said, for as long as it lasted, it was absolutely brilliant. I thought Hazan fought really well until the kick up the middle from Caolan Loughran just completely froze Hazan. And I think that happened early in the first round. And Hazan was cooking early. He was jabbing. He was landing on Lochran. Lochran obviously tanking his way through shots like he always does, which is no real surprise. But Hazan, I just thought, looked good with the jab early, but after he got clocked with that it was a front kick for sure. And I think Lochran just froze him. It was a wild opening round. Both guys were landing regularly. Like let's not get it twisted. Lochran was awesome, but he was getting hit, and that has to be said. But the calf kicks from Lochran, they were leaving him quite open, and I think that's where Hazan was looking to expose kind of the chinks in his armor. But Lochran's just a tank. The body shots were unbelievable from Caolan Loughran. Left hook was there all night long. It's so weird because I talk to people about Lochran quite a bit, and I've been high on Lochran for a long while now. It's hard to describe his style because he really is like a wrecking ball, man. He's like a Jessica Andrade type almost. Like, obviously, not to be comparing fighters from different genders and whatever, but he has massive wrecking ball vibes. Like, he's just going in there, just winging hooks, and he's great on the ground. And that's one thing we need to talk about, because I saw folks saying, why didn't Hazan wrestle more? If Hazan had got the wrestling going, Hazan did try to wrestle. Go and watch those 2 rounds back. Hazan did try to wrestle, and Caolan Loughran completely just so sharp, so quick hips. He was sensational. Like, talk about career best performance. I always thought it'd be hard to top that Luke Shanks fight, because I'll be the first one to say I thought Luke Shanks was going to beat Caolan Loughran, and Lochran just put the boots to Luke Shanks. And I didn't think you'd get a better career performance than that. And he went and did it against Dylan Hazan. He just completely decimated the Italian, who was 9-0 going into this fight. It was that second round really from Lochran that was awesome. I mean, the sprawls, like I said, were brilliant. He looked so sharp defensively. and the finishing sequence was beautiful. Starts with the uppercut, ends with the uppercut. The first uppercut staggered Hazan a little, and he tried to get Lochran back. And this is the one thing you don't want to do against Caolan Loughran. You can't do a, oh my god, I've been hit. I need to get that back ASAP, because the minute you do that, you end up with your face planted on the floor, right? So yeah, first uppercut staggered Hazan a bit, and as Hazan tried to strike back, it was a beautiful straight right down the middle, and a hook that partially landed. I think Hazan had his arms up, but it was enough just to overwhelm him. And then the final uppercut was the nail on the coffin, ground and pound cemented it. Caolan Loughran is now 8-0, guys. Like 4 straight finishes in Cage Warriors. Another Irish champ. So we've now got Rhys McKee, Paul Hughes, and Caolan Loughran representing the Emerald Isle, which is awesome to see. And I think it's the first time in a while that we've had 3 Irish champs being, holding their belts simultaneously. It might actually be the first time ever. I can only recall it being 2 at any given time. So that's obviously incredible news, especially coming off the back of that card in Dublin. I was mightily impressed with Caolan Loughran. He's an incredible fighter. I said it, people are probably tired of me saying this, but I think he'd beat a lot of perennially ranked UFC bantamweights right now. Like, this is a guy who's still young. This is a guy who's still learning. This is a guy that still hasn't lost yet, so he's still not had the opportunity to learn through defeat. I would honestly, do you know what? I'm gonna go look at some fighters in the UFC who are hanging around maybe like top 25, top 30, top 20 or something like that, and actually, look at some of these fighters as I type away, and how I think that would go. Obviously, not to take too much time on the pod, but I am genuinely very interested here, because I could be talking out of my arse at the same time and just hyping up Caolan Loughran, right? But I don't think I am. So looking at some of these guys who are, in that top 30 kind of range, I would probably back Lochran against a Davy Grant, Montel Jackson. I would back Caolan Loughran to win. I mean, these are top 20 guys. These are tough fights as well. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Lochran lost them as well. But Cody Stamann, someone who has a really good wrestling base, someone who's a really good striker. I hold Cody Stamann in high regard. Actually, they fight quite similarly. That's a fight I'd love to see. Lochran Stamann, can you imagine that? That would be nuts. And you wouldn't put it past Lochran to win against Cody Stamann, and that's a guy who's like right up there in that top 20 rank. And then you got some vets like Cub Swanson, Mario Bautista's a banger. That would be an awesome fight. You wouldn't look like guys like John Castaneda, Daniel Santos, Brian Kelleher. I don't know. Like, I really think, and this is Lochran not even at his final form. He might not even be at his middle form, right? Like, he's very early into his career, and he's going to be a massive problem in MMA. And what I will tell people, if you're not familiar with Caolan Loughran, I think a lot of people are going to hate him. The more they hear from this guy, the more that he does, more promos and more media. And when he does get to the UFC, because it is inevitable that he will, people are going to hate Caolan Loughran, because he's very, very brash. He's very confident. He's a very arrogant fighter, and not in a bad way. I think every great fighter needs to have a massive chip on their shoulder and needs to have this uncanny arrogance. And I believe that of any top athlete in any sport. But I don't think people are prepared for Caolan Loughran. I mean, he's going to piss a lot of people off, and it's going to be hilarious when he does. In terms of Caolan Loughran's future, I was doing a bit of thinking about this. Where does Caolan Loughran go now? Does he defend his belt at 135 pounds? Will he immediately get the UFC call up? I would personally love to see him in the UFC, like, immediately. But we say this of all the guys, right? We said it of Hardwick, we said it of Hughes, but I don't know. Like, this is it. I think the only 2 fights that I would love to see Caolan Loughran in, if I'm being completely honest, and I don't want to fantasy matchmake too much, and I don't want to pick fighters that I know aren't within that range. There's 2 fighters I'd love to see fight Caolan Loughran. If Martignoni, because I wouldn't be surprised if Martignoni beats Shajidul Haque, and obviously we got that confirmed as a fight during this card, so breaking news, whatever. If Martignoni wins that fight at 125 pounds, nothing's stopping him from being like, I want both belts. I'm coming for you, Caolan Loughran. You beat my teammate. I'm going to avenge that loss. I think that would be an incredible fight and a legacy-defining fight so early into his career for Caolan Loughran, a legacy-defining fight for Martignoni if he's going up for 2 straps. That's a fight I'd love to see. But in wanting to see Lochran be active, if we're saying he's not going to the UFC, my biggest shout for this, I'd love to see Nathan Fletcher versus Caolan Loughran. Nathan Fletcher obviously beat Caolan Loughran on the amateur circuit back in 2018. He's on a 2-fight win streak. He's looked brilliant since returning from that Wooding loss. I believe there's probably a lot of animosity there between both fighters. I mean, I don't think it takes much to rile Caolan Loughran up. That's the fight you've got to do. If you're Cage Warriors, you do this fight. I believe they're returning to Ireland in this year. So, God, wouldn't that be an insane fight if they managed to put that together? The only reason that I'm not so heavy now on guys going to the UFC is we haven't really seen much. You know, a few years ago, it was you won a Cage Warriors belt, off you go. And now it's like Paul Hughes is still kicking around unbelievably, right? Like, why is Paul Hughes still here? Hopefully Reese gets the call up. It's only been this year, I believe, only Modestas Bukauskas and Christian Leroy Duncan have gotten the call up, right? So, you know, maybe I'm talking out of my arse. I mean, that's 2 champs who just recently won their belts. So it could be that I'm talking out of my arse completely, but it doesn't feel like that frequency is there anymore of people getting called up. If it is, obviously, hell yeah, Caolan Loughran, one of those guys. Same, I said it with Hardwick as well, and I said it with Hughes when Hughes won. I don't need to see these guys in no contender series bullshit. Like, we need these guys in, ready to go, and against really good opposition right off the bat, because there's no point in wasting time. I don't need to see Caolan Loughran in contender series prove himself against some random guy. I want to see Caolan Loughran immediately into the UFC because of what he's achieved already in his career. But if that doesn't happen, Nathan Fletcher signed me the fuck up for that. And even Martignoni, if Martignoni beats Haque and he wants to go champ status, I would love to watch that fight. It's worth just really quickly chatting about Dylan Hazan. Obviously 9-1 now. I always say this: don't turn on fighters. When I always see it, when someone's undefeated, they're no longer undefeated. People just drop them immediately. Dylan Hazan is still an absolutely incredible fighter. Wouldn't be surprised if he fights for this belt again in the next 18 months. He's going to be back. He's a sensational MMA wrestler. He gave as good as he got in this fight until he got frozen with that head kick. But go back and watch it. It was way more competitive than most people realize until Caolan Loughran froze him with a head kick and then just absolutely overwhelmed him. So I think that's enough of that. Obviously, there were people who tweeted me during the event asking me to talk about Caolan Loughran. Of course, I'm going to talk about it. So I hope that covers that enough, and I've made a few people happy. I'm obviously going to talk about every single fight, but I hope I gave the Lochran fight enough shine for people. Darren Stewart and Leon Aliu was the co-main event, and we'll work our way down as we always do. Not a crazy amount to say about this fight. I think this is more of a fight where it's, you know, props to Darren Stewart. He's now on a 2-fight win streak in Cage Warriors. He still doesn't look quite himself in the cage. Like, Darren Stewart, don't get me wrong, has always had a decent grappling base. I've always said this. His offensive grappling gets slept on. We saw him dominate Kevin Holland in the 3rd round of their fight when he was in top control. Like, he's a strong guy and he's really dominant in grappling positions, which you don't usually expect from someone who's the dentist, right? Someone who's known for knocking people out and rearranging their structure of their mouth, right? Like, Darren Stewart is an absolute banger. So this fight was weird. I will confess that I thought Aliu would probably win just because I felt he had better tools. But look, Darren Stewart, he knew what his path was to victory. I thought Aliu took the first round 100%. He had a head kick that landed on Stewart. Less than a minute in, the two of them were throwing heat, and Stewart did fall into a takedown early. What I will say is, with that takedown, he didn't do much from it, and Aliu was elbowing from the bottom, had a very active guard trying to work in the armbar early. So I think the best thing that Stewart did was adjust to the fact that he's not going to win this fight by just putting his head on Aliu's chest, because that's what it was in the first round, and that's why, in my opinion, he lost that round. But then in the second round and in the third round, I thought Stewart was a lot better. He was getting the takedown. He was striking body, body, head, very classic traditional ground and pound MMA top control. It was very much a throwback. Again, not a crazy amount to say about this fight. I don't want to waste people's time talking about a fight that was genuinely quite dull. And I think Darren Stewart would be quite open. I know he's someone who always loves to finish fights. It was very dull, but to beat a guy like Aliu, who was 10-2, who was the favorite going into this fight, Aliu is no joke. Genuinely like a contender at 185 pounds. Darren Stewart went in there and got the job done, got paid, took very, very, very minimal damage. And he's, again, right now he's staking his claim to fight for that belt one day. I do think Stanton, obviously the Stanton Webb fight is going to happen, and you don't want to assume that Stanton's going to win. But if he does, he's going on like a tour of rematches, right? Like he's got Stewart there just waiting in the wings as well. James Webb is obviously a rematch. Bonner, he could rematch as well. There's a lot of opportunities there for Mick Stanton, and Darren Stewart is one of them. But again, props to Stewart. He fought the way he had to fight. It wasn't very interesting. I scored it 29-28 to Stewart. Aliu was good off his back until he kind of resigned himself to defeat a little, I felt. Stopped elbowing off his back and kind of just was very happy to sit in closed guard, which was kind of weird. So Darren Stewart, again, props to him, but I just want to move on and talk about the next fight on this card because it was unbelievable. So Giannis Bakar versus Carlo Pedesoli Jr. What a fight. I mean, this, I immediately put it into my fight of the year shortlist. Obviously, it's not better than Luke Riley and Callum Parker, but got to have a shortlist, right? And this is right up there. This is probably the second best fight of the year. Giannis Bakar was insanely durable, right? You know, people say the best ability is availability. I think the best ability is durability. And I think with durability is something that you're blessed with. It's not something that you can, you can build toughness and you can build a willingness to persevere. But if your chin's not there, your chin's not there. And that's not something that you can train a crazy amount. You can take care of your chin, spar less, blah, blah, blah. But a gettable chin is a gettable chin. And Giannis Bakar is just, he's made of something completely different because Carlo Pedersoli put the work to Giannis Bakar early. And the way that fight ended, the visual of how Bakar looked as he got the finish. I mean, before we even, let's work our way down from round one all the way down to round three. So just to give you a broad picture of the fight, because if you didn't watch it and for whatever reason you're listening to this very niche podcast, then allow me to kind of take you on this journey. Pedersoli was so quick in the first round at getting the grappling going. Single leg takedown less than like 90 seconds into the fight. And as he was getting the takedown, already synced his hook in to take the back. It was so slick. And Pedersoli is such a phenomenal fighter on the ground. Like, I don't think people realize just how good he is on the mat. But he got the body triangle in early. He had about 3 minutes to work. Didn't manage to get the submission, but did enough work on the ground, did enough active pursuing of submissions, did enough striking on the ground that he definitely won the first round. There was a moment where they did separate towards the end of the round where Bakar managed to get to his feet and he managed to land a few good shots on Pedesoli, it has to be said, backing Pedesoli up. But the first round was very much a Pedesoli round. In round two, Bakar was pressing early, landing cleanly, couple of really good calf kicks in there for good measure as well. Pedesoli was starting to look a bit laboured already. I don't know if that the adrenaline dump of that first round of getting the single leg, of having someone's back for 3 minutes when you're a prolific submission artist, maybe that kind of blew his tank a little bit. But he did manage to get the double leg takedown with ease, it has to be said. Was clocking Bakar on the feet, taking him down over and over again, and then locked up the Kimura, which looked quite close. to finish in the fight, but didn't manage to get the submission. I think the best moment of this round, or like the least the most memorable for me, is when Bakar lands this insane knee, right? Like this huge knee, and I'm like just waiting for Pedesoli to drop. And Pedesoli doesn't even move. I haven't seen a replay. Maybe it hits his chest and I'm overreacting, but it looked to me like the knee hit him straight on the chin, and Pedersoli was just stood there like nothing had happened. Like a knee that would knock out 99.9% of everyone that's ever existed in human civilization. And Giannis and Pedersoli was just like, cool. Nice shot, dude. What else have you got? I think to end the round, it was really interesting because Bakar was landing over and over again on the ground. Pedersoli looked knackered towards the end. He pulled guard. Bakar followed through, and he really should have let Pedersoli back up because I think he could have avoided losing this round, which is what I think happened. I thought going into the third, Pedersoli was up 20-18. Bakar looked like he was starting to take over, but Pedersoli had too many really kind of good moments. He was hitting Bakar early. He did have the Kimura. He was very close to finishing the fight a couple of times. And, Bakar was just about surviving, and he started to take over as Pedersoli started to gas. And you saw that in the third round, halfway through the third round, where the finish comes. Bakar was definitely hurting Pedersoli in the third and practically fell into a takedown. And at this point, Bakar was bleeding profusely, right? Anyone who watched the fight, that cut that he had when they showed it at the end of the fight, and you can literally just, you can see like all the fucking flesh and shit. It was a nasty, nasty cut, and he was bleeding. His face was just red, just a crimson mask. Like you couldn't even see a tinge of his skin tone. It was all red, and it was just insane. And Bakar was marching Pedersoli down, got taken down by Pedersoli, but he just reversed the position, just landed over and over and over and over and over again, and the referee was forced to stop a fight. Just insane, an insane fight. Like Pedersoli had Bakar dead to rights a couple of times, especially in the first round when he had his back for so long. Second round when he had the Kimura, when he was hitting Bakar over and over again, and Bakar was the underdog in this fight. It has to be said, and he's someone immediately need to keep an eye on. He really, really is, because that was his Cage Warriors debut. He's fought in Brave, he's fought in Titan, so he's fought around in a few different promotions around the world, but beating a guy like Pedersoli, who might be the most experienced dude he's fought and definitely the best fighter he's fought, like Pedersoli, former UFC fighter, on a really nice coming off a really nice win over Mados Fleminas last year. It was just crazy. I mean, Giannis Bakar, take a bow. Like the durability on this man, the ability to just end a fight when you've been losing handily will always be insane to me. It will always be insane to all of us as MMA fans. The insane grit that you need to be humbled for 2 straight rounds. You train for a fight. You're in fight camp. You fully believe that you're going to beat the person opposite you. Cage door locks behind you both, and you're getting battered. The ability to still believe in yourself and also still have the physical attributes to continue pushing forward, still have the mental fortitude to continue pushing forward. Giannis Bakar might be the MVP of this card purely based off that. Obviously, Lochran did what he did and it was amazing, but just everything that Bakar went through, like that whole journey of 15 minutes of fighting, I thought he was unbelievable, and I can't wait to see him again, because at 170 pounds we might have a new player at welterweight, which is already arguably Cage Warriors' most stacked division, in my opinion. So Giannis Bakar, take a bow, unbelievable performance. So moving on, we had Tanio Pagliariccio versus Giordano. Fanny, I'm really, really excited and very happy that Fanny is back and that he was signed to Cage Warriors again, because obviously he's had a couple of fights outside of the promotion. He's a great 125er. We know him for that insane flying knee knockout that he had a couple of years back. Still one of the best Cage Warriors knockouts that you'll ever see. An incredible, incredible finish. But this Tanio Pagliariccio fight was interesting because much like Giannis Bakar, Fanny was losing, and he was losing for different reasons. So in round one, Pagliariccio was doing really well with the calf kicks. I thought he was brilliant with the calf kicks, but Fanny was checking a few of them, it has to be said. Pagliariccio was doing so well as the aggressor. He had Fanny completely frozen. Like it has to be said, Tanya Pagliariccio was fighting brilliantly as the aggressor in this fight. And in that first round, Fanny was throwing nothing. Pagliariccio had a nice head kick towards the end of the round. Definitely scored that round 10-9 clear to Pagliariccio. And I was a bit concerned about Fanny. It's rare that you see him so gun shy. He's usually the aggressor. He's usually kick heavy, shooting to the body with kicks and everything. Like he's always the aggressor, and Tanyo kind of took that role from him, which was for me was very, very interesting to see and quite a big surprise. In round two, Pagliariccio was just in and out all night long. Fanny was barely touching him. Pagliariccio was putting the boots to him. Very, very good jabbing to the body, straights to the body, straights to the head. Like Tanya Pagliariccio was having an incredible fight. And early in the second round, Fanny throws an illegal knee as he was defending a takedown attempt from Pagliariccio. You all know my opinion. Legalize it. I don't give a fuck. Like, and again, I know I sound like an idiot, right? But this is I genuinely believe that you should never be able to stall on your knees in a fight and not be punished for it. I get that it's the rule set, and Fanny did have a point deducted, and it's why he needed to push, because he had the point deduction, he lost the first round, and he needed to do something with the latter stages of this fight. But in my opinion, fair enough, you take the point. I get that it's the rules, but I hope we get to a point one day where MMA as a whole, and it's hard in countries like the US and in England where there's such insane media coverage and things can get blown out of proportion and everything. I'm a big Ryzen guy. Everyone knows I'm a big JMMA guy. And you see it in 1FC, the grounded knees as well, or knees to grounded opponents. Just it gives fighters great flexibility on the ground. Like people think that it doesn't. It's hard to how do I put this? People think that it enables strikers to get one up over the wrestlers, and actually it doesn't. Like I think if anyone benefits from it, it's the grapplers, because when you've got someone down, you can just knee them in the head. It completely changes the dynamic of a fight. Obviously, it's great that if someone is in an arm bar or something, they can just stomp someone's head. And I'm not talking that level of craziness, but there needs to be something for people who stall on their knees. And the Fanny one was weird because potentially it doesn't even land on Pagliariccio's head. It potentially hits the body. I've not seen alternate angles of it. I've only seen the one replay of it. But cool, he had a point deducted. And at this point, Fanny needed to fight aggressively. And it's interesting because if you fight aggressively against Tanyo, you open yourself up to get grappled. But Fanny definitely, he knew what situation he was in. He was probably down in the second round, and with a point deduction that only makes it worse. And the first round as well, he definitely lost that. There was a jumping knee from Fanny that landed partially, and the reason I want to kind of zero in on that is because I think that this might have caused the beginning of the end for Pagliariccio. Fanny had again, it has to be said, beautiful in the second round with he had a judo throw, like a toss while on his knees. It was insane. Like it was genuinely one of the coolest throws I've seen in a while in MMA. He had the final minute of the round to work and took the back and struck away at Tanyo as the bell went. Fanny might have won that second round, but I'm not entirely sure that he did. And obviously with a point deduction, he definitely didn't. But I'm talking just from a perspective of did he win the round or not? I thought that he might have done enough. But going into the third round, he was definitely not up on the scorecards because of the point deduction. And I'm watching the fight and I'm like, okay, Fanny, we've seen him drill people with knees. We've seen wild comebacks from him before. We've seen him stop fights out of nowhere. And as I'm thinking, what's Fanny going to do in this third round? The fight is waved off out of nowhere, just stopped in between rounds. And it was definitely interesting because the immediate thing that the camera pans to Tanyo and he's like pointing at his eye, and there wasn't an eye poke or anything like that, at least not to my knowledge. because he at no point protested for an eye poke during the fight. I think what happened at the comment, I've not actually seen that he's said anything, Tanyo. The commentary team said that he might have blurred vision or blurry vision. And I had a couple of people tweet me during the event saying that he might have broken his orbital as well. So I went and looked back, and even during the fight, it kind of made sense to me that, as I mentioned, that flying knee from Gerardo Fanny, I think that might have done something to Tanyo. Either hit him and broke his orbital, it might have concussed him a little bit, and he was a bit dazed. He didn't show it in the round, and he did well to tough it out, I guess. But there was a moment, I believe, where Fanny is on top of him and he's signaling to the ref about his eye, and I don't know if he's trying to signal that he wants out of the fight. So it's a very interesting one, very weird one. But look, Gerardo Fanny, he obviously that 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 finish comes from a place of him doing something to Tanyo at something. It definitely didn't come from the illegal knee, I don't think, because I don't even think the knee lands again on his head. It probably goes to the chest, and he seemed fine. He had his time to recover. I think the flying knee afterwards is what caused either the broken orbital or the concussion, in my opinion. So Gerardo Fanny back in Cage Warriors in the win column. He will always be a player at 125 pounds. So worth keeping an eye on him for sure. So then we had our main card opener, which was Simone Patrizi versus Emil Shaferi. Pretty fun fight, I will say. Shaferi was very impressive. Patrizi definitely grew into the fight. There was a big knee from Patrizi in the first round to break the grappling attempt from Shaferi, and Shaferi was hunting the takedowns all fight long. Patrizi did well in several moments to kind of defend it where possible, but Shaferi did score the takedown 90 seconds in. I thought Patrizi did well. There are a lot of fighters here, and I think the theme of this card is playing aggressor. Like being the aggressor in a fight is where people manage to thrive. Like when Fanny decided to be the aggressor, he took the fight to Tanyo and scored that finish in between rounds. And Darren Stewart, when he decided to be the aggressor on the ground, that's how he won. Caolan Loughran, foot on the gas the whole fight, playing aggressor. And I think this is a huge story, or the biggest theme, in my opinion. And Simone Patrizi definitely displayed that, because I had it 2018 Shaferi going into the third round, because Patrizi was winging shots in the first round and Shaferi was exposing him. Just every time he winged shots, Shaferi dipped down under, double leg takedown, beautiful technique. Patrizi was down, right? Time and time again. And Patrizi started to do better in the second round when he started to tighten up his shots. Anytime he winged shots, Shaferi would punish him. And I think there was great corner work, I imagine. Don't speak Italian. But I imagine there was great corner work there, because in the third round, Patrizi does come out and it is a bit tighter. He's tightening up his combinations. He's tightening up his strikes. There's a moment in the third round that leads to the finishing sequence where Shaferi's clinching up with Patrizi. Patrizi disengages the clinch with a tight elbow over the top, really nice, and then lands a big right hand to slump Shaferi. Pulls the comeback win out of nowhere. He was down on the cards 2018 very comfortably, in my opinion. Another huge comeback win. I was very impressed with Patrizi's ability to come back in this fight, because Shaferi looked like he had him beat with the wrestling. Patrizi was fighting wildly, and he's not a fighter that I'm incredibly familiar with, so I don't know if this is usually his style, or if he was a bit nervous, or he just wanted that highlight reel KO in Italy. But I was more impressed of him when he decided to tighten up his techniques. And the minute he did, in that second round, there were flashes of it, and that's when he was landing. And the minute he did in the third, I mean, that elbow is as crisp as you like to disengage from the clinch. And then the right hand over the top is stunning. Genuinely an awesome knockout. Really, really cool visual, the way it all played out. Quite impressive from Simone Patrizi. Excited to see him again in there at 155 pounds. Kadim Dia versus Milton Afonso Cabral. Cabral coming off signing an extension of Cage Warriors, coming off a wild head kick finish last year. And Kadim Dia, who was 2-0 going into this fight, climbed up to 3-0 because he just completely just blanketed Cabral. Dia was getting the takedown so easily. It was actually really disappointing seeing Cabral so easy to take down. Like, it was very, very simple for Dia. He was just blanketing Cabral first round, not much to say. Very much, if you watch the Darren Stewart fight, you don't need to watch the Kadim Dia one because it was almost a carbon copy. It's just that Cabral had a few more moments than Leon Aliu did. So in the second round, it was again one thing I'll say actually before I get into talking about the second and third rounds. Kadim Dia looked massive. At 170 pounds, he looked a whole weight class bigger than Cabral in there, and that showed in the grappling department. Both fighters were swinging and missing in the second round, and Dia used the opportunity as Cabral was winging shots to just take him to the fence, trip takedown, blanketing him. Big elbows late from Dia, it has to be said, landed heavy, heavy, powerful shots, and the ref did warn Cabral to move, but then the bell went to signal the end of the second round. I thought where Cabral kind of messed up in this fight, and I don't know if it's maybe that he's not the most incredibly technical fighter, and he's more of a brawler, but he was just winging shots weirdly. Like, he was no setup, just no calf kicks, no jab, no straights, no angle cutting. It was all big, massive hook or big right hand over the top. And Dia was just circling out of the way, very composed, very smart. Didn't get himself into much trouble until towards the very, very end of round three, where Cabral manages to reverse the position on the ground and chooses to go to his feet. And Dia was tagging him a little bit, but he was swinging too wildly. And then Cabral, he was swinging wildly the whole fight, manages to hit Dia with, I think it was a right hook, and wobble Dia. Dia was walking backwards languidly, and it was a very bad visual. Cabral had him, in my opinion, could have finished this fight in the third round, and just inexplicably goes for the takedown against a guy who's been dominating him on the ground, and he just doesn't do much with it. And I'm watching that, and it blew my mind, because for Cabral, you could have had a massive comeback win. I mean, we're talking about Patrizi having a comeback win, Giannis Bakar having a comeback win. There wasn't that from Cabral. Like, he definitely rocked Dia, and he had enough time. If he just, instead of following him down, not even following him down, instead of going for the takedown, if he just disengaged, kept the fight standing, he could have finished Kadim Dia. So Dia was impressive until he wasn't. Interesting fight at 170 pounds. Dia climbs to 3-0. We'll probably see him again with Cabral now 4-3. Obviously signed to an extension, so we will definitely see him again. But I want to see. I've not been mightily impressed by him in Cage Warriors, apart from that knockout that he had. I want to see more of him, and I hope that maybe it was just a weird off night for him, because striking the way he was striking with no setup was just incredibly bizarre, and doesn't. I've watched Cabral fight. This isn't the way that Cabral fights, I don't think, and I hope it was just an off night for him, because it was quite disappointing. Kadim Dia, though, as I said, 3-0, 29-28 in my opinion. Just a fairly easy fight for him until it wasn't in the last minute or so. And then we had Enrico Degani versus Alessandro Giordano. Giordano, someone that fought Nathan Fletcher last year, performed quite well, but obviously lost that fight. But there were moments where he looked quite good in that fight. And I thought he would definitely be the favourite going into this one. I'd never really watched Degani fight too much. I've seen a few clips here and there, and the usual kind of scouting that I do before these cards take place. But I was very, very impressed with Degani in this fight. He had a really good 1-2 to open the fight, and when he landed it once, he went for the 1-2 again and dropped Giordano early. Giordano recovered well, and the next minute or so of the first round was contested up against the fence. Giordano had a head kick as well that missed marginally, then tried a spinning back kick out of nowhere, which got him taken down by Degani. Degani did try to get the rear naked choke. Giordano defended calmly, tackled the hands, and did really well to avoid panicking. We saw this in the Nathan Fletcher fight as well. He's the first person to take Nathan Fletcher to a decision, and he did that by defending the submission attempts really well. So we saw it again here. Giordano's a really, really good defensive grappler when it comes to defending awkward kind of angles and awkward submission attempts from his opponents. My biggest takeaway from this fight, though, was how quick Degani is. Great fundamentals on the feet. I tweeted it a couple of times. Like, he is so fundamentally sound. Really nice jab. Really good. Again, the 1-2, like, these are simple techniques, but he's just executing them really well. Jab straight to the body was nice. Calf kicks. It was just a measured, composed performance from Degani. Giordano definitely did well to be the aggressor in the second round. Had a nice roundhouse to the body, pressed forward really well. Went for a guillotine attempt at one point, Darce choke attempt. I had it 19-19 going into the second round. I thought Giordano did enough to score points, in my opinion. He was more damaging in the second round. Degani was, again, fundamentally sound. Maybe didn't get his foot off the gas as well as he did in round one. So an even fight going into the third round. But in that third round, it was all Degani. Got the takedown early, got the ground and pound early as well, just striking over and over and over again. And Degani was just retaining control on the ground, flattening Giordano out late, pounding him out, almost getting the rear naked choke attempt. A clear 29-28. At 135 pounds, Enrico Degani is genuinely quite fun. Most people might look over this fight and, it's a decision and people are hunting out finishes and all of that. But go watch this fight back. It's not a barn burner by any means. But if you want to see a good, fundamentally sound technical striker, I think Degani is someone to keep an eye on. I'll just call that out off the bat. At bantamweight, he could be quite a fun fighter for Cage Warriors. Francesco Mateo and Johan Araste was the next fight on the card, and it lasted less than a minute, and it was not cool. It was kind of gross. Not kind of gross, very gross. If you like watching arms breaking and elbows dislocating and stuff, then this is the fight for you. If you ever watch Shogun versus Coleman, this is the fight for you. I don't want to rag on fighters as a dude behind a mic and not doing the fighting, but with Johan Araste, it was really he did it to himself. Francesco Mateo, sorry, he goes for the takedown attempt, more of like a toss. Johan Araste, as he's getting taken down, inexplicably tries to post and frame. Why would you do that? Like, he's in midair and he's like, oh, let me put my hand down and frame. And no, if you are halfway to going down, like you are in midair, you have been taken down, and you need to find fundamentally sound ways to escape that moment, right? You need to find, once you hit the mat, that's when you start building to get back up. And Araste inexplicably tries to post up, and as he does it, it looked like the arm broke to me. I saw on social afterwards he said that his elbow dislocated. It was gross. I tweeted out a video, so if you are into that kind of stuff, there is video evidence out there in the world. If you go on the Yellow Gloves pod, it was gross to see, not gonna lie. And Araste brought it on himself. Francesco Mateo, not much to say. 2-0 now. Guess we'll see him again. Not a very memorable fight, other than the fact that there was a gross way that it ended. It just, baffles me that someone would post that. But anyways, we should definitely move past that, and we can go on to a more interesting fight, which was Sam Creasy versus Michelangelo Lupoli. Lupoli and Creasy had no business being on the prelims. I tweeted this early doors. Terrific matchmaking at 125 pounds. Would have loved to have seen it be the prelim headliner, or at least somewhere on the main card. I think you could have had it over Kadim Dia and Milton Afonso Cabral as the prelim headliner. And you could have probably switched it around maybe with the Fanny Pagliariccio, only because like Creasy's coming off being champ of defending his belt, obviously losing it to Shaj, but Creasy's only lost to former Cage Warriors champions. He's an incredible fighter, and he should have, in my opinion, been higher up on the card. Not a very eventful fight though. Creasy just immediately was walking Lupoli down up against the fence, working with short strikes, and got the 10-9 nice and easy in the first round. Second round, Creasy had a couple of good moments, nice calf kicks, a very quiet round again where Creasy is being the aggressor, is doing the one strike, and he's mitigating Lupoli's grappling, which is really good, mitigating Lupoli's flurries by circling and just tagging away. It was a very a very smart and very safe performance from Sam Creasy. I know he tweeted after the fight that he wasn't, or he posted on Insta that he wasn't happy with his performance and that he knows he could have done better. But when you're coming off a knockout loss, it makes sense to be a bit trepidatious, and it makes sense to be someone who's mitigating chaos in the cage. And I think he did that really well. He was more aggressive than Lupoli, had a higher striking output, landed a big right hand late. A dull fight. Again, I'll be the first to say it was a dull fight, but it's nice to see Creasy back in the win column. Creasy's one of the nicest guys in MMA, and you like to always see the nice guys win. At 125 pounds, Creasy will always be a player in Cage Warriors because he will beat your up and comers. He'll beat on everyone, and before you know it, he's on a 3-fight win streak, and you have to give him a crack at gold. So props to Creasy. Nice to see him win. Not a very memorable fight. What was memorable though was Marco Sarasiarvi versus Eduardo Caiazza. That was memorable because Marco Sarasiarvi, out of nowhere, early into the first round, circles to Caiazza's back, jumps on his back. Love a good backpack submission. Love someone who will just jump on someone's back as they're standing up against the fence, getting the rear naked choke in. It looked like a bit of a neck crank, but when you watch the replay, I mean, there were pictures going around. I posted one as well, but there was a really, I can't shout the person out because I don't know what their handle was, but there was someone who posted a picture of Caiazza's face, like after Sarasiarvi let go of the submission, and his head was just purple. Like his head was just straight up purple. I posted a picture of it as well, where when Sarasiarvi had the choke applied, and you could just see that squeeze was coming from somewhere else, man. Like these Finnish guys can grapple. I've been saying this for a while. Like these Finnish guys can seriously grapple, and Sarasiarvi is clearly an example of that. 3-0 now, 145 pounds. Get this man back in the cage ASAP, because I'm very excited to see how his career progresses, because that finish was electric, and it was one of my favorite finishes on the card, actually. And speaking of submissions and great finishes and fighters to keep an eye on, Dario Bellandi, man, 5-1 now. After he wins this fight, jumps on the cage, jumps on top of the cage, and he's strapping his waist, signaling for a title shot. He's probably a couple of wins away, but I wouldn't doubt that he can get to that point. At 185 pounds, this man is dangerous. Like this was my pick for fight of the night going into it. I know Cage Warriors don't do awards and all of that, but as a fan, then I like to have my own little fantasy fight of the night and performance of the night and all of that. But Dario Bellandi Carlson was going to be that, in my opinion. Carlson shot for the takedown early. Bellandi went for the guillotine really early. Looked tight, but Carlson escaped. Bellandi then threw up a triangle a few seconds later, which looked very tight, and Carlson escaped. Bellandi then had an armbar attempt that was deep, and Carlson escaped. And at this point, I was like, what is going on? Like, how is he managing to tough out these positions, Daniel Carlson? And then Bellandi slowly transitions to the back, sinks in the rear naked choke. This time, Carlson taps, just relentless. Title run incoming 100% for Dario Bellandi. Middleweight has a new surging contender in town. Like, mark my words, Bellandi is legit. Daniel Carlson, we'll see him again 100%. His first career loss. He's a grinder. He's a fun fighter. Not a fighter that most people are familiar with, but you should go watch some of his fights because he is very interesting. But Dario Bellandi turned a fight that was supposed to be, in my mind, a competitive back and forth war, and just completely decimated Carlson in that first round. Incredible submission. It could have been the armbar, could have been the triangle, could have been the gilly. It was the rear naked choke in the end. Really impressive from Dario Bellandi. We then had Andrei Tishenko versus Yoga Prabowo. This is one of the fighters, and there's a couple of them. Well, there's actually a few of them on this card from the Fight Academy thing that Cage Warriors are doing, like a reality TV show type, like tough style thing, where you eventually you get a Cage Warriors contract or whatever. This fight was bizarre only because Prabowo, he's known for being a submission guy, Indonesian fighter, I believe. Yes, Indonesian fighter. I didn't want to disrespect my man, Yoga, but great name, Yoga Prabowo, has to be said, and he looks like a great submission specialist. Went back and watched some of his fights. Interested to see how this MMA Fight Academy thing goes for Cage Warriors. Like it's always a cool concept when you do the reality TV thing, and there's like a contract on the line afterwards, and an ability to farm fighters from different parts of the world, as they're clearly doing here with these Indonesian fighters. But Andrei Tishenko obviously got the win, got the unanimous decision in the end. The fight was interesting early because 10 seconds into the fight, Yoga dropped Tishenko with a piston of a right hand. Like, go and watch that back because Yoga just out of nowhere, just so quick, hits Tishenko. Tishenko drops, but Tishenko survives early, gets the easy takedown on Yoga. Massive hammer fists against Yoga's head, his head's practically pinned against the fence. Tishenko was whooping him bad after getting dropped. Like, it's people always, this isn't boxing. Like, just because you get dropped doesn't mean you lose the round. Like, Yoga dropped Tishenko early, and then Tishenko just went to town on him. First round was a decimation, and second round, Yoga he just couldn't defend the takedowns. It was crazy how easy Tishenko was getting those takedowns. 0-0 effort from him, or minimal effort from him to get them down. And the person who had zero effort was Yoga. I don't know, maybe I know he's a good offensive grappler because he's got a good amount of submissions, great neck attacker, but Tishenko just blanketed him on the ground. Like, I think he had the adrenaline dump. Did Yoga early with the knockdown, and he probably just blew his tank. And Tishenko had a ninja choke attempt towards the end of the fight, which looked really cool, but Yoga didn't tap. 10-9 Tishenko, I thought 30-27, clean sweep on the cards. Yoga looks pretty interesting, like on face value, but that performance left a lot to be desired. And Tishenko just whooped on him. It was quite sad to see because I'm very excited, very invested in these Fight Academy guys, but yeah, Tishenko just had no regard for that. He was like, I'm just going to dominate this man, and you guys are going to have to watch me do it for 15 minutes. We spoke about MVPs earlier in the card. One of the MVPs for me is Jasmine Favero, and I just want to highlight her just for a couple of minutes here because it's hard to get 135-pound female fighters who are interesting outside of the UFC. I know everyone rags on the UFC women's bantamweight division, and obviously, yes, it's not good, but the best fighters are all there, and the interesting fighters are all there, right? Like someone like Giordano, for example, interesting fighter. She's fighting for the belt. Outside of the UFC, though, it's hard to find interesting 135ers or promising 135ers. And Jasmine Favero, put some respect on her name. Like, I had like someone tweeting me saying that Favero is one of their favorite fighters in Cage Warriors right now. That just goes to show how much fun that this fighter is. 135 pounds, she's going in there. She's 3-0 now. Obviously, fought Isabella Walchak in this fight, and yeah, Jasmine Favero, just a good knockout artist, a good submission artist. She's 3-0, all finishes, really, really impressive. In this fight, it was the trip takedown from Jasmine Favero early. This is the thing with Favero. Like, when she takes people down, she's trying to knock them out, right? Favero had a couple of more trip takedowns. Walchak kept bouncing up. Eventually, Favero managed to isolate the arm, and as they worked their way back up, Favero landed this incredible knee to Walchak's head, who was completely busted open and just totally dazed at that point. Like, it was just the point of the knee to the skull. It was a beautiful knee, and Favero just swarmed her up against the fence. Referee was, forced to step in. Favero's pretty damn cool. Like, I just wanted to highlight her because Cage Warriors don't really put on many female fights nowadays. Like, it's clearly not at the top of their list of priorities. So, and I think Favero is someone who could. I think I said this after her fight against So. I think Favero is someone that you could probably bring back a belt for and build this fighter up, put a belt around her waist, have her fight someone. They're going back to Rome later on in the year. I'm not saying put her in a title match now, obviously, because she doesn't have that kind of hype and recognition. But listen, when she's 5, 6, 7-0, someone to keep an eye on. And I'm very impressed by Jasmine Favero. I think she can do some really great things in her career. It's a very shallow division worldwide, but again, it will continue to be shallow until fighters like this start to come through. And if they're coming through, you got to give them their just desserts. You got to give them their props, and you've got to give them the opportunity to fight. right? And I'm glad Cage Warriors are opening the door for someone like Jasmine Favero, because she could do some great things at 135 pounds. We're coming up now towards the end of the card, the last two fights on this card. So we'll start with Luca Borrando versus Baris Adeguzul. Awesome fight. Luca Borrando is someone that I'm immediately invested in as a fighter. This is my kind of fighter. Fast hands in the pocket. He's happy to trade. Adeguzul won the first round, has to be said, was very, very impressive with the grappling. Brilliant takedown attempts as Borrando was trying to, knee him and work him in the clinch. But in the second and third round, Borrando just took over. Very, very quick hands. Love the knees at the end of the combinations. Like, I'm just gonna geek out at the moment about striking techniques because this is my bag, right? But I love fighters who will have combinations, throw some combinations with their hands, and then have a knee at the end of the combination. Like, it's pure like poetry for me. Like, I love watching fighters who will commit to the knee, not just in the clinch or knee into the body, or basic knee techniques. Like fighters who are gonna throw a 1-2 or throw some sort of striking combination and then just exclamation point knee at the end of that combination. Luca Borrando was doing that multiple times in this fight, and that's my kind of fighter. Like, if you do that shit, I'm always going to keep an eye on all of your fights. And Luca Borrando earned a big fan in me in this because I'd never seen him fight before. He's 3-0 now at 145 pounds. I can't wait to see him again. It's so much so that Borrando's pace that he was putting on Adeguzul in between rounds, like going into the third round, Adeguzul took an eternity to get off his stool. Referee was even checking that he was okay to proceed, okay to continue with the fight, because Borrando just put a wicked pace on him. And in the third round, 50 seconds in, Borrando was all over Baris Adeguzul to start. Hooks to the body, knee to the skull, takes Baris Adeguzul down, constant strikes over and over again, big elbow, and then Dan Movaheady steps in, stops the fight. Luca Borrando is legit, and he's one of my biggest takeaways from this card. Very impressed with Luca Borrando. Cannot wait to see him again. And coming in now to the final fight on the card, which was the first fight on the card, but the final fight that we'll talk about is Cornelius Aratonen versus Gianluca Ancora. Cornelius Aratonen, one of the fighters from the Fight Academy setup that I was talking about, Indonesian fighter. Very impressed with him, actually. Very, very impressed. He, in my opinion, won a clean 30-27. There were moments where he had to grapple, and it wasn't incredibly fun to watch. And Ancora had some moments off his back with the Kimura grip. But Aratonen, what I liked about his performance was the striking. I thought he was very, very impressive on his feet. Very quick hands, rapid uppercut. I was very impressed by his uppercut. The way he throws it, he's quite a rangy fighter, got a long reach. And yeah, he was just winging really good shots, landing really well. Fight could have been stopped at one point. Ref was floating over them as Aratonen was just pounding out Ancora, who was turtling up at that point towards the end of the third round. Referee didn't step in, so it ended up going to a decision. Cornelius Aratonen, interested to see how this guy ends up faring in this Fight Academy setup, because I was very impressed by him. Ancora was going to grapple, was going to try and grapple, was going to try and submit him, and he did well to avoid potentially catastrophic moments with the Kimura grip and everything. But on the feet, it was just two different levels between these fighters, and Cornelius just dominated throughout. So I was very impressed by him. That kind of wraps it up for my recap of Cage Warriors 154. Like I said, it wasn't a very eventful card. There were good moments like interspersed between like a bunch of dull fights, like Kadim Dia, Cabral wasn't very memorable. Darren Stewart's fight wasn't very memorable. Sam Creasey's fight wasn't very memorable. And the Tashenko fight wasn't incredibly memorable as well. So we had good moments. Bellandi, Sarasyavi, Jasmine Favero, very impressive fighters, very impressive performances. Borrando, like I said, Patrizi, there were really good moments. And obviously in the main event, Caolan Loughran, just a fight that I won't forget for a very long time, just because it just felt like a confirmation of everything I knew about Caolan Loughran. He's for real. He's the real deal. And, last time that Cage Warriors went to Rome, it was a clean sweep from the Italians. This time around, on the main card, I mean, they won 1 of 5 fights, and Fanny, Bakar, Stewart, and Lochran did their job to deny that clean sweep of Italian fighters like last time. So definitely a success for Cage Warriors, because it's again another fight outside of the UK, outside of Ireland, where they can expand on their footprint. We won't have a Cage Warriors card again until Cage Warriors 155 in San Diego on the 2nd of June. So around a month with no action. So what I want to do is, if we've not got fights to talk about, let's talk about other stuff Cage Warriors related, right? So what I want to pose to you guys, if you're still listening to the pod, I want to do a couple of mailbags in the next month. Just any questions that you have about anything Cage Warriors or MMA related, we can expand the discussions a little bit, but we'll try and keep it to Cage Warriors. Any questions that people have, drop me some tweets, DM me on Insta, Yellow Gloves Pod on both socials. You can leave a comment on the YouTube video of this episode. Just anything, and what I'll do is I'll compile these questions and we can do like a 20-30 minute mailbag, just to keep the discussion going, because there are going to be periods where Cage Warriors are not going to be doing the back-to-back thing, and they're going to have some moments where they're not having any cards. Like between Cage Warriors 155, well, we don't have 156 booked in yet, so that's interesting. But there are these major gaps, right? So I want to keep it interesting. We'll keep going with we'll do the mailbags in between cards. But other than that, I guess it's time for me to stop talking. Thank you very much for listening. Leave a like, rating, comment, wherever you're listening to this on, and I will catch you all on the next one.